In October of 2016, I experienced what I believed to be an extraterrestrial inside my house, followed soon after by 3 other extraterrestrials in my house. It was a normal Friday evening at first. My dad, I was in college living with him at the time, had gone to sleep at about 10 at night, went to lay on my bed where I promptly pulled out my phone and began browsing Reddit. This lasted for about 45 minutes. Before I finally decided to go to sleep, I realized that my throat felt a little dry, so I got up to get some water from the fridge. My room used to be a second living room off the kitchen, so there's no door on the frame, only a thick curtain. As I approached the curtain, everything was normal. It was just a normal night. The only thing that seemed a little off was how quiet it was. There were no cricket cicadas chirping outside, which there always were. I live in a secluded country ranch house, which was unusual. I could still hear my dad's white noisemaker in his bedroom, though he uses it to help him sleep. It felt like a normal late night. I pulled the curtain aside to step out into the kitchen and experienced the single most terrifying thing in my entire life. Behind the curtain was what I believed to be an extraterrestrial. It was facing the hallway to my dad's room, and it was in a crouched position. We had a nightlight plugged in right above the kitchen countertop, so I assume it was trying to avoid that light. Its skin color was a sort of dark gray gunmetal color. As I pulled the curtain all the way back, the alien turned his head sharply to look at me. I gasped and was immediately overcome by an immense sense of dread and terror. I was quite literally paralyzed by fear. Stood there with my hand on the curtain, mouth agape. It stared at me for a couple of seconds, and then everything went black. I regained consciousness an hour later and was laying on top of my bed, the covers still made. My heart was pounding, and it felt like it was beating 1,000,000 times a minute. I saw something on my left, which was the darkest part of my room, and had a door leading to our carport. Standing over my bed were 3 dark gray figures. They were tall, their heads nearly touching the 7-foot ceilings in my room. I turned my head, stared at them, and began to experience the same sense of terror as before. It was the exact same sense of dread and paralysis. I was unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything except look. This time they looked at me for much longer than a couple of seconds. It felt like it lasted a full minute or more. At the end of that minute, the being in the middle leaned in a little bit and moved its hand toward my foot. It tapped its finger on my foot 3 times slowly. Each time it tapped, a strange sensation pulsed through my body. It was just a weird energy that I can't really describe. After the 3rd pulse subsided, the being stood straight again, and then everything went black again. I regained consciousness yet again a minute or 2 later, still on top of my bed, covers still made, and immediately began to cry. I don't mean just a tear or 2. I mean that I was quite literally just bawling my eyes out for the next few minutes. Eventually all that emotion subsided, and I grabbed my phone from my bedside table. It was 1:33 in the morning. I didn't end up going to sleep at all that night. I just sort of sat there on my bed trying to explain to myself what just happened. In the years since this has happened, I've yet to come up with an explanation that doesn't involve aliens, demons, ghosts, or some sort of paranormal phenomenon. I thought of sleep paralysis at first, but I never went to sleep before I saw the first one. I was wide awake still when I went to get a drink of water. I wasn't dreaming, because I hadn't yet gone to sleep. When the 3 came right after, I thought that it could be sleep paralysis, since I woke up on my bed and was unable to move or even scream when they looked at me. But how did I get in bed when the last thing I remember was looking at the first one in my kitchen? No, you hallucinate when experiencing sleep paralysis. But how did I see 3 distinct beings that essentially remained motionless? And what the EF was that sensation whenever it tapped my foot? If it was sleep paralysis, I've never had it before, and I haven't had it since. If it was some sort of spontaneous mental breakdown, I've never had one before and haven't had one since. If it was just some bad nightmare, when did I go from browsing Reddit and getting a drink of water to asleep and having a nightmare? Every time I think about it, I get an uneasy feeling. just thinking about the dread I felt that night. It makes me feel squirmy and nervous. That night felt like death. I saw a humanoid, something in the woods outside my childhood home. This was rural northern Wisconsin, and I was 14. Up until that day, I had zero fear of the woods. I spent most of my time out there exploring and feared nothing. My parents had a lousy marriage and fought a lot, and I felt more at home outside than in the house. On hot nights, I'd take a sleeping bag and sleep on the roof of an old shack on our property. I saw bears, I saw wolves. They were always more afraid of me than me to them. I didn't believe in ghosts, Bigfoot, or demons. I'd only got lost out there once, when dark fell sooner than I expected. I stayed calm, found the North Star, and knew that if I continued south, I'd eventually come across the old railroad tracks near my house. Even the thought of spending the night out there didn't bother me. The thought of my mom's anger when I didn't come home did. So it was summer. I'd just turned 14. My mom had left my father. Father worked all the time. Sister was living on her own. Once school was out, it was me and my cat, and this is before the internet or smartphones. We lived on a dead-end dirt road, and around noon, I took my usual stroll down the long driveway to check the mail. My cat followed me everywhere, and I actually kind of relied on him to give me a heads up if there was a bear or something close by. A bit of movement behind me as I stood at the mailbox made me aware there was something across the road in the trees, but there were pesky deer everywhere. I heard a loud crash then, like something very loudly making its way through the brush. It's like every goddamn classic horror story. My brain had no capability for the thought of anything paranormal or spooky. I simply tucked the mail under my arm and headed into the woods to investigate. My cat followed close behind. I got about 10 yards in when I noticed what I hadn't noticed before. There was no noise, nothing. It was a beautiful June day, and there wasn't a single bird singing, no insects, no leaves rustling. It was absolutely silent. At the same time, I registered the silence. I got that eerie feeling that something was watching me. I stopped immediately and started scanning the woods for deer. Hunters know what I'm talking about when I say you look for the shape of a deer instead of trying to pinpoint them by color. That's when I spotted it, 2 brown furry legs, the top of it, concealed by tree branches. I went to sigh with relief when my cat hissed. I looked down and he was completely poofed out with his back arched, looking at the same thing I was. I looked back up and the legs moved, not like a deer, like a human. Everything happened at once after that. I dropped the mail, picked up my cat by the scruff, and ran for it. Whatever was out there with me was running after me. I have never run so fast in my life. I tore up the driveway into the house, locked the door, and grabbed the phone. I called my neighbor, who was the ex-chief of police, and he came over. Immediately with his pistol, he checked out the spot I was in and found nothing. I was so hysterical I was in tears. He stayed with me until I was able to reach my mom and have her come get me. Of course they thought I was completely high or delusional. I know exactly what I saw and felt. It was broad daylight. I never felt safe in those woods again and stopped sleeping outside. Witnessed an alien abduction back in 2001. This takes place when I was 13. A friend of mine wanted me to help her grandparents set up their computer. I said sure and ride my bicycle to their house. I get there and clouds appear, so I decide to make this pretty quick. I set up the computer for them, showing them all how it works and such. They go back and sit on the couch while I get my backpack to get ready to leave, as their other granddaughter, who is about 4 or 6 years old, I can't remember which, was sleeping in the other room. All of a sudden, a cold breeze went through the room. As all the doors and windows were shut, the grandparents looked toward the kitchen, and what I saw made me freeze in place. There were 3 creatures standing in the kitchen. 2 of them were short, gray creatures with a thicker neck and huge wrap-around eyes. They wore silver jumpsuits in between. Them was a taller creature looking like a humanoid mantis wearing a black robe with a yellow stripe going down the middle. They walked to another room and a minute later returned with a robed creature carrying the granddaughter in its arms. It's looking at me and I get the feeling it knows who I am. I get the feeling it knows who I am. Don't know why I got the feeling, but I did. I was very scared. More of the situation than of them, and the grandparents were looking at them too, but frozen in fear. I decided to say screw this and fought off all the fear I had and clumsily charged toward them. I didn't even make 3 steps before. The grandfather stopped me and told me they will bring her back. The creatures didn't move and continued to look at me. I couldn't get any more words out of my throat because I didn't even know what to think at this point. All of a sudden the light stretched around them and they vanished. An odd glow remained for a few seconds before fading. After a minute of an awkward silence and the grandfather repeating, "She will be brought back soon," I decided to leave. I rode my bicycle back home fast as I could while looking back to see if some ship was hiding in the clouds. Nothing was there, and I didn't sleep that night I got home. The next day I did tell my friend what happened, and she did tell me it has happened before. The grandparents and other family members have tried to stop it, but to no avail. They just accepted it with a look of defeat and moved on. The granddaughter was brought back after a few hours. A while after this, their whole family moved elsewhere. I've heard from other people who claim to experience similar events, and I feel they are legit. I used to live in Vancouver, Washington, on a street called Orchard Dale Court, so I was heading to school at about 8 that morning. I only had to walk about a block from my house to where the street meets the main road. This was your typical everyday route that I took, however, that morning was different. When I got close to St. James, I looked up from me, and across the road was what I can only describe as a creature. It was made up entirely of black spheres. In the shape of a man, it definitely had 2 legs, 2 arms, a torso, and a head. But again, all made up of black spheres, about a foot wide, a little bigger than a basketball. All of the spheres had a texture to them I had never seen before. That is creepy enough, but it was moving around a pole across the street. The thing is, and that's really hard to convey, is that this thing projected nothing but pure malevolence and fear. I felt that this thing was bad. Really, really bad. I would not say it was evil, it was just bad. It's like the difference between saying a man can be evil, but a man can be evil, but a man can also be good. This thing could not have the possibility of being good. There was no way. It was bad through and through. Anyways, when I looked at it, it stopped looking at me and just popped out of existence. It did not fade. It did not make any sound. It was just there one moment. The next moment it was gone. I was very freaked out, but it's not like I was hurt or felt bad. I was just freaked out. Anyways, I just went to school like normal, if not a little shaken. Well, that night there was some kids racing cars drunk, and there were 4 or 5 people killed, including the driver and all the passengers. When I went out with my father to the corner where it happened, I was shocked because it was the exact same intersection where I saw that thing the previous morning. I cannot help but think I saw something strange that morning, something I was not supposed to see. Whatever that creature was, it was bad, bad news. Not my story, but my mom's. When she and my aunt were young, they were playing with some neighborhood kids in the woods across the street from their house. She claims that they heard a noise from above them, looked up and saw something crouching in the branches of the trees. She said it was humanoid, about 7-8 feet tall and completely covered in fur. As soon as it noticed them, it leaped down from the tree and sprinted further into the woods. Of course, they were all terrified and ran back to the house. They never saw the thing again, but both my mom and aunt swear that it happened. I was a baby when this incident happened, but I believe my sister, who was around 10 years old at the time. My cousins, aunts, and uncles were at a birthday party one Saturday at my grandmother's house. All the adults were inside the house around dusk, but the older cousins, is ranging from 4 to 8, and my sister were outside playing. My sister isn't sure who noticed the bird in the tree first, but soon all of the cousins noticed it as well. A bird was perched on one of the lower branches just staring at them. Before their horrified eyes, the bird began transforming until it was a woman. Woman sitting on the branch leering at them. As they began shouting and screaming for their parents, the woman became a bird again. By this time, the parents had come out to investigate the commotion, but the bird wouldn't budge. Not until my grandmother, a formidable and salt of the earth type, went outside did the bird fly off. The house is creepy. It's still in the family, and I've had some other strange experiences, as did my mother. It was in the family since my parents were young teens. My cousin owns it now, and it's still creepy and old, and he doesn't really like living in the little yellow house either. In the beautiful roses my grandmother planted, strange things have been found. Animal bones, guts, melted candles, and other witchcraft type of things. A lady in white has been seen moving from room to room in the past by house guests.